Hi all, I'd like to go over with you today an important tactical theme, the theme of the chess decoy. Now, you can find a variety of tactical themes, by the way, on the improved menu at chessworld.net, puzzle books, and then view the category tactics, weaknesses to exploit. So this currently has a few of these tactical themes, and the one we're going to go over today is the decoy tactics one. Before we get into it, we can see the definition, a set of definitions I've collected together, which I think are the most important for what a decoy tactic is. A decoy tactic is used to lure a piece to a particular square. So that's the beauty of it. You're very interested in where a particular piece goes and to a particular square. It's the tactic of ensnaring a piece, usually the king or queen, by forcing it to move to a poisoned square with a sacrifice on that square. That's how you kind of get that piece to go there. You lure it with a sacrifice on that actual square. So it's not to be confused with deflection, although they seem to be used interchangeably by a lot of people, decoys and deflections. Technically, a deflection is kind of the inverse of a decoy. So a decoy involves luring a piece to a bad square. A deflection involves luring a piece kind of away from a good square. So it might have been slightly overloaded. It was defending something, and you can sort of deflect it away from defending that square. So deflection is more closely related to overloaded or overworked pieces. But the key difference really is that a decoy is luring a piece to a square by sacking on that square usually, and a deflection is luring a piece from a particular square where it's got a useful role. So with that in mind, let's have a look at a few interesting examples from this puzzle book, which you can also try yourself later after the video. Let's go together. Now, I thought this was a very clear, simple example. Okay, can you see how white can use a decoy tactic in this particular position? What piece could you lure to kind of a square which you can exploit? So if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here, can you see? Okay, rook e8, yeah, a fantastic move, celebrating the central knight as well. And now the knight can go to f6 and win that queen, and also as a bonus we can take on c6 here. So that's a clear example of a decoy tactic. You're dragging a piece to a particular square. So it's precision control. It's an instrument of precision control, really. Can you see an important decoy tactic in this position if I give you 5 seconds? Okay. Here we want to lure the king to g5, where we can, if now taking, we can fork. We have this nasty fork, king and queen. So a fantastic decoy there. Now in this position, against the mighty queen, but can the rook and knight do something? Black to play if I give you 5 seconds. Okay, rook g2, yeah, trying to decoy the king, where now this fork. In this particular position, by the way, if the queen had gone here instead, the knight f4 check is forcing a winning ending. In any case, this ending is winning for black in this particular position. So here, this is a very, very famous game from Petrosian against Ludek Pashman. So Petrosian was known more for his positional play and prophylaxis, and had the reputation of being virtually unbeatable. But on occasion he had a sparkling attacking, brilliancy. And this is one of those occasions. White play. You might want to pause the video and study the position, because there is a truly beautiful idea in this position. Okay. Petrosian played queen takes f6, so luring the king to f6. And now the amusing thing here, this check is played, so putting the king there, and now not wanting the king to go back, bishop g7, just a quiet bishop g7, believe it or not. And the king's in big trouble now. So in this continuation, this g takes and then bishop f3. So that stems from a Petrosian brilliancy game. If we look at this, instead of knight f5, if we look at rook takes d3, that's rather desperate. Same sort of, yeah, the king's just getting mated basically in all sorts of ways. So an absolutely brilliant kind of decoy there for the king to go to f6. Now here, black to play. Okay, we can lure the king to f2, kind of exposing the diagonal of death. Now we've got a blockade. The beauty of blockades is to unblockade. So rook takes c2 check. Yes, because if queen takes, we had d3 check, winning the queen. And here there's a further decoy in this position. Really beautiful position. Rook takes g2 check, putting the king on g2. Because that knight is now pinned, rook takes e1. So decoy is really the precision control of the opponent's pieces, getting them to go to specific places. Here, can you spot a powerful decoy tactic? 5 seconds. Okay. Rook takes b4, putting the queen on b4 exactly where we want her. Bishop c5, and now the queen's almost threatening e2 to escape or something, but knight d4 keeps the eye on a5. Like checkmating the king, we sometimes want to control all the escape squares and then deliver a kind of check. That happens here. So controlling a5, not touching this rook. So celebrating the pieces that control the escape and then deliver a check to the queen or king is often a way of kind of mating the queen here or the king. So let's see the next example. Now this is truly precision control, this position. White has some weaknesses on the light squares. Can we capitalize on that? The first move is rook e1 check. Now guess what was played here. Okay, we put the king back on g1 to start off with. Queen e1 check. And now that fine control that we have with the decoy is even more fine when the queen is involved rather than the rook, because we can actually do better than the rook in a way in this particular position. What can we do with a decoy tactic to control where we want the white king to be in a disastrous manner? So black to play here, if I give you 5 seconds. Okay, not g1. We want the queen to go to f1 to lure the king to f1. That's exactly where we want the king. So the bishop can now come in with this powerful check, and then we can deliver this classic mating pattern with the bishop and rook. Really capitalizing on the light square weaknesses there. Now here is a very fun example as well. 5 seconds to pause the video. You might want to study this one. This is fantastic. Okay, first we lure the knight to h1, then we lure the king to h2. Now check. Now if the king had gone back, there was rook takes h1 there. Now in this position, with the bishop controlling a lot of escape squares and the rook, we have knight f5 check. And now this is rook h4 is checkmate, because the knight's controlling e3 here as well as g3. Superb coordination of these three pieces here to deliver this amazing checkmate. This is a fantastic example from Alexander Alekhine. 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, we want to lure the king to f7. And now, believe it or not, beautiful move. 5 seconds. Yep, we want to lure the king to e6 with this queen sack. So if the king had taken, there was knight g5 mating. Now here, g4 threatens, it was threatening bishop takes f5 mate, but although that stops bishop takes f5, knight h4 checkmate here. So we can go earlier and look at that, put that on the board for fun. Knight g5 was actually checkmate there because the bishop was controlling the d6 escape square. Okay, this is a wonderful example of the power of decoy. It looks as though white's in trouble with h3 as well. 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, first we put the king either on d7 or d8 with a check. So that's not a sacrifice as such, but here the kind of decoy sacrifice really is still prepared actually. Rook e3, defending h3 and evicting the queen. But now we're really controlling where we want the opponent's pieces to be with these decoy tactics following now. 5 seconds. Really beautiful stuff in this position. Rook takes d4, putting the queen on d4 exactly where we want her, because another decoy follows. d3, putting the queen on d3 disastrously for this fork. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Decoy is a very, very fun tactic to make use of. Now here we'll be in trouble. If we went here, then there's knight f2 check. So this is against the check. Queen f2, we're still in trouble. And then luring the king to g4, it looks as though the king's going to get checkmated pretty shortly. What on earth can we do here? We don't really want to play knight d4 because rook takes d4. There's a nasty double discovered check going to arrive after that. Can the decoy come to the rescue in a defensive manner in this position if I give you 5 seconds? Okay, it turns out yes. Knight b6, put the queen on b6. Because we've got a pinned rook now. Now, queen d4 check. Yeah, we're already material up. And now we can take that queen, extinguishing black's attack. So, great use of defense there. This is a remarkable example. If I give you 5 seconds. Okay. Queen d8 check, putting the king on d8, and now the dive bomber of the chessboard, the double check, one of the most devastating tactics, forcing the king to move, and bishop d8 checkmate. If the king had moved to e8, then there was rook d8 checkmate. Now here, a very nice move. Can you spot it? 5 seconds. Okay, we really want the king on h6, so we play rook takes h6. Now the king refused, but still queen takes g8. So if the king had accepted the invitation, that decoy, queen g6 is checkmate. This position, black is a rook up, so we have to somehow maybe try for a draw if we can't win. You might want to pause the video here. Okay, white plays queen takes h5, luring the king to h5. And now g4, luring the king to g4, because there's perpetual check scenarios now. Check, and it's going to be a perpetual check. If the king goes to h3, then bishop f1 check, and the king, if they went to f5, then bishop d3. So perpetual checks with bishop f1 or bishop d3 there. In this, if the king had gone to h6, then g5 would get the queen back. Okay, here, this is really nice. You'll see that the third rank is clear in this example. What can white do? If I give you 5 seconds. We've got a kind of form pawn bishop on f6. Okay, rook takes h7, putting the king on h7. Queen h3 check. Now if the king stepped back, there was queen h8. Now here, black has actually got a defensive kind of threat of knight g8. How can we extinguish that knight g8? So maybe we want something a bit quicker than usual to make sure that has no defensive effect. Knight g8 here. If I give you 5 seconds. Okay. bang, put the king on h6, because now this lovely third rank rook e3, threatening that rook h3 mating. So this is a try to lure the bishop away from f6, but white plays this, allowing queen h5, and there's two ways to win here. Can you find one? Okay, one is rook takes h5. Yep, because if g takes, then there will be g5 checkmate. So that's absolutely winning there. Also, there was also you could also play g5 check here as well, by the way, because that pawn is pinned, so rook takes, and then rook h8 checkmate. One of my students actually helped me with that alternative variation. I've tested these with some students of mine recently. I hope you're enjoying these as well. Now this is a really difficult example, and give yourself 500 points if you can see it from here, if you want to pause the video for a few minutes. It's a very, very difficult puzzle indeed. Not just decoy, but also very, very powerful dramatic interruption tactic as well is involved in this combination. So 5 seconds if you want to pause the video. Okay, first we put the bishop on b4. So now if only a takes didn't have queen takes, or if only the rook wasn't on h2, we'd have knight c2. So here we might want to use a very, very powerful tactic with different kind, but kind of decoy as well, decoy stroke interruption. Okay, rook d2. So if the rook had taken, we had a takes b4, which was mates, because we would be interrupting the queen. And here now a powerful decoy tactic with disastrous effect, knight c2, putting the queen on c2 away from the bishop, because now a takes b4 is checkmate. A truly beautiful example. Here is another beauty. Black to play. Okay, rook takes g2, exposing that king. The king went to the corner, but now rook takes here. Rook h6, and this is mating. That's a desperate thing to do, end up mating. In these variations, if the king had taken, we would use the dive bomber of the chessboard. Rook g6. Double check, and here can you see? Yep, well you can, because it says there bishop g2 check mate. That occurred in the game apparently. So finally controlling where the king's going. Here, 5 seconds. This is a case of winning material actually. Queen takes g7, exposing the king to that lethal diagonal. Knight takes d7. Knight f6 check, and we can get the queen back with knight d5 check, and we'll be material up with white there. Now here, yep, what to do? Okay, it's rook takes h7. If the king had taken, there was rook h3 mating, but this has neglected a8. So we can take on a8 now. That's absolutely winning. Yeah, let's put the mate on the board as well, rook h3. So that would have been, yeah, putting the king exactly where we wanted. Now this one, can we get a beautiful mate somehow? 5 seconds. Okay, queen e7, trying to lure the rook to e7. So it's kind of decoy deflection in a way, because we're trying to take away the rook from that defensive f8. But here, yeah, queen f8, we put the rook there, so we can play rook takes f8, checkmate. I love that combination of rook and bishop aesthetically, capitalizing on the dark square weaknesses there. Now in this position, this starts off to set the scene with queen h5 threatening mate here. Now we finally control where we want the opponent's queen to be. First we put the queen on d5. Okay, it's still defending f7 though, so why would that be important? Okay, our bishop's controlling an escape square, which is always, we must consider we've partially created a mating net when we control escape squares. So here, queen takes f7, spectacular, for knight d7 checkmate. Beautiful one there. Okay, here, can you guess? Okay, rook g8, check, and now bishop takes f6, lovely bishop pair delivering a checkmate there. Now here, can we drag the king out? Is the knight holding up f7? We can play this anyway, putting the knight on f7. Rook takes, the king comes out to play. Knight b6 check. Are we just wanting to win the queen? Nope, stronger at bishop h5, trying to drag the king up the board. Queen f7 check. Check here is going to be mating with bishop f2 after king h4. Okay, so you're getting an idea of the decoy tactic in the context of amazing combinations. Okay, here we're kind of exploiting the potentially vulnerable back row. 5 seconds. Rook e8 check. So we're putting the bishop on e8. Because if the queen had taken, we had queen f6. The queen's kind of overloaded. But now the interruption of the back row means queen f8 checkmate. This is a beauty. It starts off with a kind of clearance tactic. Can you guess? Okay, queen takes d7, kind of clearing that d-file. For now, a beautiful decoy tactic. Knight c7, putting the rook on c7 for rook d8 checkmate, echoing Morphy's opera game conclusion, the bishop and kind of Morphy style mate pattern. Now here, okay, 5 seconds. Rook c8, interrupting. If bishop takes, we had queen takes. We can now play rook takes c8, pinning that queen, luring it to c8. Queen e7 checkmate. It looks as though we're in a spot of bother here because our queen is pinned. Can we get out of this? Okay, we can, it seems, with bishop takes f7, putting the king on f7 for rook f1 check. So rook f1 check, and now rook f8 check, dragging the rook away from pinning our queen to release the queen for queen g7 checkmate. Here it looks as though we're in a dodgy situation. We can take very fast action here with the form pawn. Okay, rook h8, put the king on h8, and now put the king on h8 again for the queen to come to h1. We've cleared out for the queen to go to h7. In this position, looks pretty complicated, doesn't it? But can you see what black can do? Okay, rook g8. So we got an attack on the queen. We've also got queen g1 support, so it's very dangerous for the back row. So with this move, white is trying to at least arrange rook d1. We play queen g1, that rook d1, which has been arranged there. But now, is there anything deadly that black can do here that you can spot? Okay, rook c1 check, and now queen c1 checkmate. This is a very, very nice kind of decoy interruption style puzzle. White to play. Okay, it starts off with bishop c7. So putting the queen on c7, which kind of means c5. If we play now rook takes c5, the queen has to respond, not the rook. And now we can play queen b7 check. And now rook a1 is checkmate. If we look at this again, if rook takes c7 had been played, then actually there's queen b7. So if there was rook takes c5 checkmate. Beautiful stuff. Here, white to play. Okay, nice queen sack. Putting the king on h7, f6 check. Black could have played that. That delays things. Okay, but doesn't change the end result. Check, putting the king on h7 for this checkmate. Okay, here the king hasn't yet managed to castle, and black taps into this. Bishop takes f2, knight g4. Now if the king went to g1, there's queen b6 mating. Knight e3. And here, bishop d7. Where's the queen going? Very limited squares. The knight's holding c4, and now knight c2 check, winning that queen. This position is very beautiful. Black to play. 5 seconds. Okay, queen a5 check. Putting the king on a5. Rook takes a2 check, and now a5 is checkmate. This one, it looks as though we want to play knight e4, but we can't because the knight's pinned. What can we do here? 5 seconds. Black to play. Okay. We unpin, putting the queen on f6. It's kind of sacrificing the knight, luring the queen to f6 in particular. So it's not controlling h1 either. So there's kind of elements of deflection. And we don't have a queen, we don't have a rook, nor a bishop. We want to check the king and checkmate, in fact, with the underpromotion to a knight. Leela would be proud. she likes her underpromotions to the knight. So, okay, here, classic example. Was it Adams Torre? Not Michael Adams, but an older Adams. And some say it was like composed. It might not have been actually occurring in the game, but a classic back row mate weaknesses it tapped into as well. You might want to pause the video. If you get this, you're an absolute tactical genius, the whole combination. Queen g4, trying to lure the queen away from e8. The queen refuses. And now, queen c4, trying to lure either the rook or the queen to c4. Both of them refuse. And now again, trying to lure the rook or the queen to c7 for rook takes e8. Both of them refuse. Now here's a really subtle point about this. So the rook kind of can't take on e2. We have actually a4, believe it or not. And now rook e4. And in this position, that's feeling the pressure. We have queen takes b7. Yeah, and there's no defense now for this back row issue. Yeah, a very interesting example indeed. And another very, very famous example from a Marshall Gold Coins game. Black to play. If you haven't seen this, you must study your iconic games if you haven't seen this one. The Marshall, Frank Marshall, US champion multiple times. Marshall Gambit, known for the Marshall Gambit in the Royal of Paz. Played queen g3, luring the queen to g3 because now knight e2 check, knight takes g3 check, and black is a piece up, so 92 check for a big advantage. So I hope you enjoyed these decoy tactic examples. You can practice them, maybe try and get faster and faster on them as well. So improved menu at Chess My Old Puzzle Books. There's one of many themes I want to go over actually in the next few days, so please subscribe to the Kingscrusher YouTube channel. So you should see the bottom thing and use that notification bell, and I want to take your tactics to the next level. I'm hoping this was beneficial to many of you. Please leave your comments, questions, and any tactical themes you really want to study for the next video as well. Okay, thanks very much.